Okay, so the recording is started. Do we have a member question for Jen?
So I don't necessarily have any specific questions for Jennifer right now. But what I would like to hear is just a quick, little introduction overview of like what your strengths are and um, why you think you're the best candidate for this, if that's okay.
Geez, Lance, way to lead with something simple. That's such a
Well, no.
multifaceted question. You have all night. Um,
Yeah, well, so what's the most important thing for you? How about that?
well, I think anyone who's come and heard me speak, Lance, I think you've heard me speak, and I know I'm not sure who else is on the call, but this didn't start out for me as this wasn't what I wanted to do, right? This wasn't where I thought that I was ever going to be in my life. I unfortunately was thrown into, this environment of in your face, front and center, just how horrible our government in schools, our school boards, our teachers, and not all of them, but I will tell you, I venture to say more than 50% of them now were just teaching our kids things that we did not know, right? And the good teachers that we had in there weren't really able to do much about the bad teachers. And I, as a problem solving parent and single mom of three boys, I got in there and I started dismantling the school board in Fairfax County, person by person, place by place, because I needed to get answers and I needed to get things done. And I'm the only advocate for my child, right? So I pursued through, I learned how to advocate through legislature. I learned how to lobby. I learned how to get to be a part of the community, single handedly got in Fairfax County. And I don't know if you guys know some of that background, but I was living here. I grew up down here. I did go up to DC, Fairfax County to work for a little bit. And I was up there, before COVID for a few years. And then COVID hit and I was this red dot in the sea of blue with pretty much no rights in school, no rights anywhere really. We had no voice, and that doesn't sit well with me. I'm not. Lance has heard me. I think I'm not a quiet person, right? This isn't something can sit back and idly watch things happen. So I had to learn by fire, and though that is my strength, I got in there and got down and dirty and became this staunch advocate, an activist for children's rights, for parental rights in schools, for the right to choose. I ended up homeschooling for 4 years, which I wish to God I could support the kids and homeschool to this day. And that is not a popular opinion in this current race. But at the end of the day, I know how we all need the choice, right, within our own families, and we have to be able to make that choice. And our government wasn't letting it. It just didn't sit well with me. So it's a strength for me that I'm a fighter. I'm not quiet. I'm a disruptor. I'm here to move mountains. And I did that when I was up there by helping to get Governor Youngkin elected. I did that by getting a transgender child out of the school that my son was going to. He had been put in his school because he raped another child at a different school. The superintendent up there, whom I got fired, moved him to another school, which happened to be my son's school. There was four moms in one of the largest counties in the country, and we moved mountains. So that's one of my greatest strengths. And I think it's a strength that I'm not an educator. I think it's a strength that I've not been in well, someone yelled at me the other day for saying that. Actually, a teacher. She said, if you homeschooled, you're an educator. And I said, you know what? You're right. I was an educator and I am an educator. I'm raising little patriots. I'm raising Republicans. I'm raising conservatives. So I am educating. I educate them every single day. But I think the strength that I have is that I, as a businesswoman, as an advocate, and I find my business background secondary to anymore to the current culture, because we need someone like me on this school board who isn't afraid of the unions, who isn't afraid of being the minority on the board. If we don't get two other candidates that I'm supporting in also to flip this board completely. But I feel like I am that voice. I'm the disruptor. I'm strong. I'm the problem solver. I'm the advocate for all the choices that we have to be able to have our kids for limited government in the schools, but also maximizing some parameters for our teachers.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Jen. And I know that we've talked a lot, and I know one of your big things was taking that being a fighter and really bringing transparency to the budget, which is a huge thing. So I appreciate you jumping on the call and answering some questions for us tonight. So we just got joined by Matt. So Matt, I don't know if you have a question, but I just had Jen give us a little introduction.
Nope, so far I'm good.
I guess Will.
Wait, is that Matt as in Allie's husband?
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am. It most certainly is.
Your darling wife and I have been on, we've been speakers together. We were talking pretty often before she left for the first of the Moms for America conference a few weeks ago. But
Yep.
We've been on a bunch of American missions calls together, and we followed up afterwards, of course, with personal calls. I love Allie. She's truly just an inspirational person to do what we need to do and be a disruptor and move the mountains.
Well, thank you. I will definitely pass on the sentiment for sure.
I texted her the other day. She knows.
All right.
Cool. Well, I guess I had a question I wanted to follow up. I actually have a number of questions, but I'll start with just one, and then hopefully we can keep it rolling with like everybody's questions. And this is actually isn't the main question that I had, but it's just one that maybe I forgot to put on the survey, which is surprising considering how long it is that I could have possibly forgotten to put anything on there. But my question actually was, are you familiar with consent education, and what is your opinion about it?
Sorry, Lily, you broke up. Did you say consent education?
That's right.
I am not familiar with that term.
Okay, I'll explain it and then you can let me know what you think about it. Of course, there's classic sex ed, which in some ways goes through all the biological processes of how sex works. But consent education is it goes through the social process of what it means to consent to any sexual activity, and then also how to say no. And it also goes through the process where you have to obtain consent. So it essentially teaches you how to approach that issue respectfully, and also how to stand up for your own point of view. I guess referring to it all kind of in the most charitable terms and everything. So yeah, that's kind of what it's about and everything. I just wanted to know, because I know both of the candidates were saying that sex education should be left up to the parents. But I didn't ask specifically about consent education, which is maybe in the same category, but a little different.
Well, I'll tell you, if you hear me at school board meetings, you hear me at any of my speaking engagements, I am, and I say it to teachers, I just said at a parent teacher conference this week, I am a huge, and this might be a twist on what you're saying, but I'm going to start here. I do not think that we should have an opt-out process. We need to have an opt-in process. And as a result, I've opted my kids out of every single thing until the school can provide it to me. And if they can't provide it to me, then since they're both opted out, they have to come to me and show me. And that is unacceptable. That is backwards. We used to have it where if you had a sensitive topic, or you wanted to opt in, or some parents don't want to address certain topics with their kids, birth control, fluoride, for God's sake, used to be one, if you can imagine. And now look how far we've come. But you used to have to opt in, not opt out. And this is where not only transparency with the budget and being fiscally responsible or irresponsible in this current board's case is so imperative. We have got to have full curriculum transparency. And I have done so many deep dives into the social and emotional learning curriculum, as well as where all the ESSER funds have been contributed to. I have found so much information on how we are misappropriating those funds and using them for sexual education and for what we're considering the SEL or the CRT, which now they're lumped together for anyone who doesn't know that. And they're embedding them in our curricula hidden is as simply as a math problem. If you were to opt out of everything, they have to confront you with it and give you the information. I think that's wrong. One of my missions, first and foremost mission, is to go through the curriculum and find out where all these embedded ideologies are placed, who's funding them out of the budget, and how we're going to turn it on its end.
Okay, so I still kind of want to know what you think about that sort of education as a whole, because in my mind, I do view it as a safety issue that people might not have actually received that education. So it's kind of more like a safety issue and less about even like the mechanics of any kind of intimacy. Um, an example, actually, there was like a third world country, and I don't remember exactly where it was, but somebody actually required that training in the schools. And the case of like rape and other things, like those sorts of things, went down literally by, I think, an order of magnitude of 2 percentage points. So that was kind of one of the reasons why I was going to ask about that, because there's actually danger in ignorance, I think, about that.
So you're explicitly asking about biological sex education then? You're not talking about the actual SEL, because they're totally different. They're totally different within the current curriculum. The way the current curriculums
No,
are.
I'm asking about educating people about if they're going to initiate sex, specifically obtaining the consent of the person that they're going to initiate with, and if somebody is trying to initiate sex, knowing how to say no.
Listen, I think that at the end of the day, it's a family's, we aren't a third world country, respectfully, and we have to start taking back the responsibility of child rearing and raising our kids in a fashion that the kids have a moral compass. And I don't believe that should be left up to an educator, because what happens is there's too much wiggle room, right? We don't really know what they're learning. Now, when it comes to sexual responsibility as it pertains to biology and sex and how babies are made, of course, I also believe in educating kids on birth control, because there are some teens who won't go to parents to talk about birth control, no matter how well communicative they are with their parents. It's just an embarrassing topic. But if they learn the information, on their own, it could be dangerous. If you have a biology lesson, if you will, back, guys, I'm old and I'm 50 now, and we have this, as humiliating as it was, our biology teacher showed everybody how to put a condom on a cucumber, told them how to go purchase them, never instructed anything on pregnancy or abortion, but strictly just, this is how babies are made and this is how you can prevent it. At a certain level in high school, I see no real adverse problem with that. I think most of these kids probably already get that information, but I would like for the ones who don't have it to have access to it. But I still firmly believe that if you're having a conversation about sex with a child, it needs to be your own.
Okay, do we have the next member question?
Oh. Not quite. But okay. I don't mean to take too long, but Lily, you were basically talking about rape prevention, correct? When it comes down to it?
Yes, it's
Yeah.
pretty much about how to prevent either accidentally doing rape or accidentally, or not
Okay.
accidentally, but we're being on the receiving end of it.
Yeah, basically a situation, something like, yeah, I'm not sure what's happened currently in the public education system, but now when I was going to school, like they basically before they taught us like this is how babies were made when we were younger, they actually showed us like this person's trying to touch you in a bad way. I'm like, tell them to stop, or tell a trusted adult. It's stuff like that. I'm like, I'm not sure if they still do it now, but I remember that they would teach us about that. Yeah. I don't know what's happened to the school system since then, though.
They
Okay,
are
if
still
nobody else
doing it,
has any
Dave.
questions.
They actually
Okay.
are doing that, Dave.
Sure. Sure.
Here's where the problem lies.
Yeah.
They're taking it a step further now.
Yeah.
So we've got this opportunity for educators who aren't with good intentions. And so instead of having a simple blanketed conversation with perhaps maybe, you know, at this point, back in the day, and I don't know how old you are, but I remember those conversations, and that was like in maybe the 3rd or 4th grade. And it was humiliating, but it was very quick. It was brief. If anyone had any questions, they went to the guidance counselor, and they were instructed to go to the guidance counselor to further that discussion. It wasn't a lesson per se. I think we have already opened Pandora's box to where we are trying to put the genie back in the bottle, because we have opened it up for a plethora of dangers over and above our kids just not understanding if they're in a sexual situation that may or may not be what they want to be in. They're now being groomed by those same people to question their sexuality, to encourage them to get on gay dating sites and explore their sexuality, to get on heterosexual dating sites to explore their sexuality. This is in middle school. It's happened at my son's school. It's something that we have to put a lid on, get control, set parameters, and go back to the basics the way we used to. Of course, children need to be taught that if someone's coming to you and tries to touch you inappropriately, that this is what you need to do. You need to go find an adult that you trust. And in most cases, we know, because I've been on numerous human trafficking boards as well, and currently working with another one trying to assist them. Most of these cases happen with family members or close friends. So we're talking about a very small percentage of kids who this actually happens to. And then we are trying to get them to tell a trusted adult, and they don't even have any. So this needs to be a larger global problem that we have to tackle. But right now, I think on the micro level, we have to take all that power away from our school systems and put it back to the parents to educate their kids, but help and give them tools to do so.
Okay, if we're still waiting on any other member questions, I had another one that was more so the meat of some of the stuff that I was reading in the survey here. We got to near the end, and it brought up the questions about the required vaccinations for schools, and then also the questions about homeschooling and like if the homeschoolers should be taxed for the education of other children or that sort of a thing. So let's see. I guess I'll narrow down to one just for now. It asks, do you believe homeschoolers should be required to pay taxes to fund public education or services? And it says other. And then I asked, please explain your thoughts. And then you said, I believe this is a multifaceted issue that cannot be answered with one question. So I was just wondering if you could expand a little bit more on the others, where you say you do believe homeschoolers should be required to pay taxes. Do you support homeschoolers receiving a tax voucher?
Sorry, I kept trying to hit my unmute button. My finger was too fat. So here's where, as a prior homeschooling parent, I think this is a multifaceted question. I firmly believe that the family unit is this central deciding factor for what is best for their children. So if you need to be a homeschooling parent or your child is better in homeschool, I support that 100%. I do not think it is fair for homeschooling parents to have to pay any public school taxes when they aren't participating in any public school services. Where I feel this is multifaceted is I do think that the public school system and how we manage that's a long haul. That's a marathon. We have to work on that. We have to structure that and think of how that would work. But I think we need to, in the interim, involve more of the homeschooling co-ops, involve more of the independent homeschooling families in the public school, give them opportunity for the kids to also take sports more fluidly, not quite the intramural. Like, I feel right now we put too many barricades in front of them to really make it simple and give them a social avenue, I guess, to come in and feel comfortable doing that. There needs to be some bridge programs between homeschools. And if we were able to be developing those, we would have to fund them, right? And so in that case, I do believe that, you know, a homeschooling parent should have to contribute to the tax bracket. Is it the exact same number? I also don't think that's necessarily fair, because that's an overtax. And right now we know this school board is so wildly irresponsible fiscally. They're not good stewards of our money, and they're trying to raise taxes now because they can't balance a budget. So the reason I felt that it was, you know, a multifaceted question is because there are all these open-ended options that I would love to pursue, and that it is definitely part of my passion to see more resources and avenues for homeschooling parents. Because as a single mom who was homeschooling and working full-time, my kids and my work were the only two things I had. Because it was a full-time job to homeschool them the way that I really wanted them to, but that was my decision. And I think that there's a lot of other curriculums that homeschool moms and parents or dads do that work for their families as well. And some look at more of a classical approach, some look at more of a STEM approach. And I fell somewhere in between, and it was a lot for me. But I would have liked to have seen more resources from the public school system, and having paid taxes, I feel like I deserved that. And I think everyone deserves that.
Okay, do we have any other member questions?
I don't have any at this point.
Okay. So the other questions that I think that our group discussed that we wanted to ask you about, we wanted to hear a little bit more about your opinion on the mandatory quarantine and the pop-up vaccine events and those sorts of things, like I guess some of the health freedom issues. Specifically, I guess maybe I'll just kind of like ask the same questions again, and then maybe kind of interact a little bit more than was possible with just filling out the survey. Um, Oh, you did say, while ensuring the health safety of students is important, promoting medical intervention should be left to appropriate healthcare professionals. Okay, so that's promoting those, so that's not requiring. I suppose maybe more we were going to ask about the mandatory quarantine. So you're saying it should be based on careful consideration of scientific evidence, individual rights, and parental input. So I was just wondering if you could kind of explain a little bit more the balancing act that you're thinking about when you answered that way.
So as a candidate, I have to, if you want, here's what I'd like to do, if you guys don't mind. I'd like to answer personally for my experience with my family and let you know how staunchly I feel about this topic. And then I'd also like you to consider, when I answer it, a different way, a slightly different way in the respect for the community as a whole, right? Because I have to think of everyone when I'm on the school board, not just my personal family, which is why I feel that it needs to be left to the families. I feel that it is a gross overreach of any school board to try to force a mandatory quarantine. However, if there is actual scientific data that is not, you know, we're assuming that it's not vague, or we're relying on an agency that has no idea what is actually going on, I don't think that that's within the school board's right. Because let's just use COVID, for example. For some of you know that I lived up in Fairfax County in DC for just shy of 8 years. When we moved back over a year ago, just at a year ago, February like 30th, or I'm sorry, 28th of last year, we had not been able to get into my elementary school age son's school to that day still. It is so mind-blowing to me that a quarter of a mile down the road, my son's middle school was wide open. I could walk in and out. Kids were not masked. Half the teachers were still masked, but it was also a middle school, so it was harder to get the kids to comply. And they were open because the governor had put the law into place. There was no more forced masking going on, and schools were to be open. This is within the same school system, within the same district, and a quarter of a mile down the road, the feeder elementary school to that middle school had made the unilateral decision to shut down and not let any parent in there, only letting their in-person kids come through the gates. You couldn't register your child there. You couldn't do anything. You couldn't come in. You wanted paper, they brought it to you outside, to the day that we left a year and a month, 2 months ago. That is unacceptable to me. And the problem I have with it is the school board had to follow the gubernatorial mandate or the law that was put into legislation that year. The school system itself has a little bit of leeway from a community by community standpoint, right? To assess the, if you will, the threat to their independent community. I think that's a problem. I think that if we're going to set the standard as a school board, it needs to be done blanketed across the board, period, end of story. Again, this goes in line as well with some of the sexual education. We don't have room to let them wiggle. We have to sternly state and hold them accountable to the process and the procedures, because the only ones who were suffering were the kids. My son didn't understand why I couldn't come see his classroom, but yet his brother's right down the street. I was in and out all the time. And it does harm. And I think that's where the government, when they come in and they say to us, oh, well, we've assessed the threat. We'll leave it up to you as, you know, at the federal level, at the state level, at the local level, you know, to assess your community. I understand that. We need that. That's our constitutional right. I mean, that is what we need to be holding on to. However, as a school board, the entire school board needs to be accountable and consistent, right? We need consistency. And so I personally was appalled, and I fought and fought and fought. I mean, I fought like hell, you guys, to get that school exposed before we left. And thank God I got called back down here. But I think that these school systems have too much say. I think that if there is a national threat like we had at COVID, but we've set a foundation now where we know that we're not going to automatically buy into this. And I didn't at the time. I questioned everything, and I had the right to do that. And I did what was best for my family, and my kids stayed home, and I didn't put them in because I wasn't going to put them in a mask. I wasn't going to force them. I wasn't going to be forced to give them a vaccine that I did not know was safe. And that has to be at the personal parent level. But I think at a certain degree, the school system does have to say, as a community as a whole, what is best for the community. If they have to set a standard to shut down, and it is scientifically backed, that we have the ability to do that. I have a vaccine injured child. I question everything. And I have 2 children who have had vaccines, and some that will never have another vaccine. I think that has to also remain within the household, that medical freedom is our God-given right. And the second the school system steps in, we're doomed.
Okay, so I'm going to attempt to kind of summarize the answer that you gave, and then you can let me know if it's accurate, just for clarity. It sounded to me like what you were saying was that the school board as a whole should be consistent in leaving those decisions to parents, and that parents should decide their own level of risk for their family. That's what I
100%.
heard.
100%.
Okay, that's accurate. Okay, cool.
So that's where it's multifaceted. I mean, the school system still has to have a say in what they're doing for the system, but they can't penalize the independent families for making a decision what's best for them. If you want to send your child to school and you feel there's no risk, that child is better and will thrive in school. We know that. Or at homeschool and thrive in that environment. But we know we've now seen the scientific numbers, we've seen the studies that these kids lost so much for being out of school when they were the lowest risk for COVID. If we ever were to have another episode like this again, another situation, I will not side with any decision unless it's fully backed by science that states that there is a credible threat that to this age bracket, to these children. And then at that point, we make the decision.
Yeah, for a follow-up for that, actually, one of the things that I did see during COVID that I thought was a good idea There's a man who's an inspirational speaker, and he just posted this as like a Facebook post. Basically, the idea of having a very firm level of risk that you can select. So, for instance, one person might decide that their acceptable level of risk is to be completely at home and use the computer, and then to have all their groceries delivered. Whereas the next bracket, there's my baby over here, just woke up from a nap. Whereas the next bracket
So cute.
might decide that their acceptable level of risk is to have their students come in person, and everybody gets to choose their acceptable level of risk, including teachers and those sorts of people during what might be considered like a societal health emergency. What are your thoughts about that?
I think that just it summarized exactly more or less what I'm saying. Is it has to be up to the independent families. You have to be able to, without penalty, be able to decide what your risk factor is. You know, I had a child have brain surgery in the height of COVID in New York City. We had to travel there for it in the height of COVID. And he had doctors that saying he was never allowed to wear a mask because his brain was going to be healing for up to 5 years. And at that point, you know, even then they suggested he don't. I was blackballed and I was crucified, and he was also blackballed and treated terrible because they still felt like there was a risk, and he had no risk to himself, and he was no risk to anybody else. But I didn't have the choice to be able to put him in. And I think that every independent person, singular human or family unit, has to decide what's best for them. And again, do a threat assessment. They have to know what's best for themselves. If the second we let government decide that for us, again, that's a problem. Oh, hi, buddy. Oh, we had that Tete. That Binky.
Yeah, we're trying to get him off it and stuff because he's like getting to the age where he's definitely supposed to stop using it, even though it's orthotic, orthodontic. But anyway, I think one of the other things that we talked about, and I think we're getting kind of to the wrapping up point and everything, unless there's other questions, which is perfectly great if there is. But anyway, the other question that we asked was what you thought about continuing the option for people to use electronic routes for education. And I believe you were saying that the data is in that the richer education is definitely in person, and that those options should no longer be continued forward and everything. But I suppose looking at it from a freedom standpoint, I was wondering if there's some flexibility in your viewpoint for that, or if you feel like everybody should be in person during a non-health emergency state for all reasons.
So I just had this conversation. My niece has, she's in an inpatient facility right now. She's 12 years old because she has a social anxiety disorder that is, it's debilitating. And she has been in school virtually since COVID because she couldn't get herself back into the classroom as many times as we tried to get her in. And the virtual option that opened up for school after COVID in Florida virtual, which not everybody can get into, was the only option she had. I will tell you, the quality of her education is abhorrent. The quality of the teachers is also abhorrent. They don't have the vested interest on the Florida virtual as a whole that I have seen. And I am opposed to that. I do think we have other options. You can homeschool. And I think that now, outside of times of extreme circumstances that we saw like COVID, that our kids need to be in school. We have dumbed down these last 3 generations of kids now that are going to be coming out, and that is mostly because we lowered our benchmark, we lowered the standards, we've brought all the literacy. Essentially, we let the teachers take the literacy caps to the lowest of low, right? They didn't take it to the high ceiling. They took it to the low ceiling just to get these kids through and past. And most of that came from the bridge from virtual to going back into person, because they felt that they had lost so much education during virtual school. So we know that it's there. We know that it does not do our children anything. It does harm. It doesn't do them justice. It does harm. We're enabling a next generation of kids who have social anxiety disorders like my niece who now, and don't get me wrong, there's going to be children with medical issues who may want to do virtual programs, but I truly believe there's so few and far between, and I've seen some of the numbers, and it is less than like 0.01% of medical diagnoses that would require children to be essentially like a bubble boy syndrome, which my middle child was for the first 6 years of his life before we mainstreamed him, that would need a service like that. We have got to get back to kids in person, teaching them the values, the morals, the science, the technology, the math, the English, the writing, the cursive handwriting. We've got to get them into workshop. We've got to get them into wood shop. We've got to teach them life skills, how to balance a checkbook. We can't do all of that on virtual school. It is not the same as human contact. And so I would like to see it gone. I would. However, again, I would like to see a better bridge between the homeschooling community. I think that has also been proven to be an exemplary form of education for children. So why not work the two that we have that we know work? Why would we want to sacrifice our kids to a model that we know doesn't?
I think I just lost my headphones because my baby was climbing on my head. So apologies if this is a little bit less like auditory and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, to say a little bit about my personal journey and everything. My parents actually make a homeschooling magazine and have the most popular homeschooling website in the world. And they, I guess, enrolled me in a number of different online classes when I was growing up. And that's actually the online classes, essentially just being given a book and say, hey, spend time with your book. That's essentially how I learned a tremendous number of subjects. And can you still?
You're breaking up, Lillian.
Your audio dropped. So
Where? This is
I think
awkward. I
so.
would have to switch. Can you hear me now?
yes,
Okay, cool. All right, so yeah, I guess what I was saying is like, as a whole, my perspective is that online education can be very quality for certain subjects at the very least. And if the online education in the public school system is as subpar as you were saying, it's quite unfortunate because it could be very good. So that's
Listen,
just
my
my
kids
overall
did
thought about it.
my kids did classical conversations. They did a number of online classes for homeschooling as well. I didn't just sit there with a book and teach them because I'm not a formally educated teacher, and I did plenty. I picked a perfect smorgasbord of lessons and online classes they did under the hood, where they learned from a live video cam working auto mechanic on how to change oil in a car. I could have taught them that too, but I wanted them to learn it online. How to change your wiper fluid, how to change a tire. Those classes were great for them, right? Because I knew that because I'm the parent. But when we're talking about the school system running virtual classes, we know they have failed. They are not equipped. We are so far out from ever being able to implement that again. We learned that in COVID. We have a decade of work to do to get us there. God forbid anything like COVID happens again. But we have nepotentious relationships with software companies that failed because they were never tested ahead of time for a situation like pandemic. And we had kids for 3 months without anything, that were going and picking up packets of paper from schools on a rotating schedule. So they were 6 feet apart because the online systems failed so categorically. And we just aren't there, Lillian. I agree with you. There are a lot of great courses, but if you are that homeschooling parent, you are your administrator of your children, right? I am not going to say that it is a great option for the community as a whole, because if you look at some of these families, they'll be like, well, I'm just going to roll him in online. Let him see how he does. I don't care. He doesn't have to go to school. He's fighting me. I don't want any accountability. Let's just let him do virtual school and see if he graduates, which he will, because they'll push him through automatically. They won't fail him because that's a failure of the system. And that's where the system's broken. It has to be improved before I would ever endorse that again.
Well, personally, I view that as a very satisfactory answer to that question. Um, and there are a lot of courses available, and making bridges between the public school and the homeschoolers, we could be very helpful, I'm sure, to the community as a whole.
I think that's the perfect middle ground, because we already know homeschooling is, we've been doing it for hundreds of years. We know it is a great model for education. And we know that in-person education is also, when it's well run and not embedded with Marxist ideologies and sexualizing our children, we know that it also works. There is such a better way to bridge the two than this virtual. And I'm glad to hear you say that, because I don't like having to staunchly tell people that opinion. That's why it's multifaceted, because I don't want to offend somebody who gets on either side. But anymore, I'm not here to placate feelings. I'm here to make a difference and make this happen and make the change and be the disruptor. And again, it gets on me a little bit because I am a homeschooling mom, and that program was so great. And we still read the Tuttle Twins. The kids they're in love with the Tuttle Twins. I supplement them because my middle schooler still doesn't have any homework here. It's absurd.
Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and scan over this survey pretty quickly, just trying to see if there was anything that I missed, but I think that was pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, I think that pretty much covered most of the questions that we had at the meeting the other night. And thanks, Jen, for coming on and talking with us.
Of course.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry I had to be vague, but you can see those are not ones that I could fit in the box. They're too important to me, and it's easy to answer content on Constitution and Declaration. It's common sense, people. Like I can do that left, right, and center. But when I'm trying to explain these tough questions that we seem to actually, you know what? They're not tough. They're not tough. They are actually simple. But anymore, we find we have to explain, the basis behind it. And I think that's unfortunate, but that's why I had to answer them that way. Cause Lance, again, you know me enough, I think, now to know that I have opinions.
Just a few.
Oh yeah, it's good to have opinions. I think if you don't have opinions, then you fall for everything, as the whole, like, Alexander Hamilton quote goes.
I love that.
Yeah, and I'm glad that we clarified those questions, because I feel a lot better actually having kind of bounced back and forth with you a little bit on these questions.
Oh, good. I'm glad. And anytime, that if you have any more, you just let me know. And again, I'd still like to be able to pop over and see that little mini sometime. I'm not quite in grandmother's stage, and well, that's a lie. I'm way not in grandmother's stage, but my oldest is 22. My youngest is 10. So now they all smell. So I have no cute baby smell. I have no cute baby stuff, nothing. So I'm like in that old aunt stage where I want to be around the littles.
Yeah.
So
Well, I'm very proud of him.
Nickname?
I'm sorry,
Lance,
you
Lance, is that what you said?
I said, so Grandma Jen is not your new nickname?
Lance, how much should I help you anymore with AFP? And don't count tomorrow.
I said we're not gonna call it that.
No, and I'm gonna be a Gigi. I'm not gonna be a grandma. I'm gonna be a Gigi or a nanny, because my nannies were nannies and they were amazing.
Well, I want to thank you again for filling out that really long survey, and also for coming on here and answering all of our questions. And I appreciate the candor that you answered all of them with, and then also all the time that you spent doing that for us. So just wanted to wish you a good night.